Okay, we are live. This is Illegitimate Scholar Live. It's on Wednesday instead of Thursday because I'm going to Hawaii tomorrow. So I'm here with T-Rex Shenanigans, writes on Substack. You want to introduce yourself, plug whatever you want to plug?
Um, yeah, well, it was originally a blogger thing, and then I tried going into podcasting, and I kind of sucked at it, and it was more of a drain on my time, and I just decided to switch everything to Substack, and it's kind of started to get a little bit more attention than I thought it would.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with just the friends I've made along the way,
Yeah,
spreading it.
right. So this article that I wanted to talk about, and I want to talk about this for a number of reasons, is the reality of preparedness. And this is something that, you know, the whole prepping thing is something that's always been interesting to me because it's like, obviously, when it's taken to its extreme, people have certain thoughts about it. But just the idea of being prepared for a catastrophe has like seems to be viewed in like the greater culture, at least where I'm from in New England, as something that is it's like people look down on it. They look down on it, and they like think that someone's crazy for being a prepper, or maybe some people think someone's crazy for being a crazy over the top prepper. But I remember growing up and hearing people say things where they were like, no, thinking that an apocalypse is coming is the crazy thing. And that idea is crazy to me. The idea that being prepared for a catastrophe is something that makes you crazy because I mean, you look at the evidence of the past and there is always these things. They always happen, right? There's always catastrophes, whether human caused or something greater. Um and you can see it in our even in like things like our science, past earth science. This is a weird metaphor, but in the past, people that were geologists, they thought that Earth's processes were a lot more balanced. They were a lot slower. Over time, things changed gradually. When really, they found out in the last few decades, and apparently a lot of what we learned in like elementary school, middle school is incorrect now, but that the processes of the Earth are a lot more catastrophic. And there's even the term catastrophism that kind of you know is a word for the idea of catastrophes coming and destroying civilizations, destroying like creating a mountain, tsunamis, things like that. Even down to like the Sphinx. This is getting into Graham Hancock stuff, which I'll be doing episodes on, and Randall Carlson because he's the geofluologist or whatever he is, or his buddy is. Okay, but I digress. Always, always. So the reality of preparedness, and then the other thing is how people don't seem to understand what happens when there's a human crisis, because there's so many examples in history of society breaking down and creating, the because it's a crisis, because it's so uncertain, that's when might makes right and violence comes out. And even though we can see examples of this even today internationally, even when we can see examples of this today internationally, like we see El Salvador right now is doing very well by a lot of metrics, even though it's a strong man who's come in and he's doing all of these things that the general people maybe don't like, or maybe I think the people in El Salvador do like it, but they had this super high crime rate, and then it all plummeted. Or the crime rate went down when they started just arresting everybody. Okay, I got distracted. Sorry. So yeah, do you have anything to say about what I said? Because I said a lot of things, and that's what we're going to be looking at in your article. Those are the things that I'm thinking about.
Well, I think that the negative connotation comes from, well, obviously the media always plays things up. And I mean, I'm a movie guy, and I always think about Tremors, Burt Gummer. is like the extreme, but he's seen as like he's also turned into like a pop culture folk hero for people in that community.
I don't know.
But the other problem, I guess, is back in the 2000s, National Geographic had a TV show called Doomsday Preppers.
I remember that, yeah.
And every person prepping in that show is prepping for some crazy catastrophe. And some of them are legitimate fears like swine flu, government collapse, economic collapse. And then then you have guys who are like, this guy was in Alaska. It's like, I'm prepping for this giant tidal wave to come and hit Alaska. And I'm like, and then the funny things, they always come up with these like, was it Yellowstone super volcano, meteorite hitting the Earth was one of them. And at the end of the show, they always go into how unlikely this event is to happen. So it's pretty much also, you're showing the most extreme of it, and then you're also at the very end of the episode explaining how the most extreme people are lunatics.
You think that was like by design? You think there were like FBI intelligence agency people like in the Nat Geo office telling them like, okay, we're going to make this show, it's going to make money, but you have to put off this image of two things. People are crazy to think that society is going to collapse. We got to make sure people don't freak out. And the other thing is we need to demonize and make fun of the people who are preparing for it. So it's like a two-pronged attack. Do you think that was intentional, or do you think it was just the nature of the media?
I'm going to go with the nature of the media on that one. I'm not one to buy into grand conspiracies anymore, mainly because the conspiracy theorists have cried wolf too many times already. And they still do it. So I don't buy into it that crazy, but I do believe that Nat Geo saw these people and thought that they can make entertaining TV. And then, and then at the end, they just put a little sidebar, like they're kind of saying like, we don't condone what these people are doing, but we just want to show you that these people exist.
Yeah.
Kind of like how the TLC is called the Learning Channel, but everything in there is just like, South Park was right in terms of lowering in the bar.
Yeah. There's
like,
something, there's something to be said there about like incentives in society, because obviously things like the Learning Channel turned into how many kids can this ethnic woman have. But that's like, it didn't used to be like that. And they kind of responded to the incentives of the society, and that's based on what the values of society are and on like what the incentives are in the society. In our society, it's money. It's not usually money, but in ours it's mainly money. And that really means that people just got what they wanted, and even though what they wanted wasn't really great for them,
well, people enjoy watching car crashes. And I mean, what's a bigger car crash than, people who go crazy when they coupon, people who go to the most obscene to save $1 to the point where they're, they're washing paper towels, and digging in the trash for food because they feel the need to go to the grocery store. People who conjoin twins that look like a two-headed person. Let's see, all just and like the really, really fat people trying to get weight loss surgery, and then you have Honey Boo Boo.
It's a modern day freak show, I think, and I'm not calling them freaks. I'm saying that's what it is for people watching it. Like that's what it is. I mean, you can view it however you want, but that's the spectacle of it, right? Dance moms, geez, I hate that one. Yeah, I mean, that's a different conversation, but there is definitely something that shows that the value, the fact that those reality shows exist shows that our society is values the wrong things in my judgment, not a ethereal judgment, but to me those are wrong, and I think that it's evident of a lot of issues in our society. So I'm just gonna share your article up here so people can follow along to where we're at. Somebody can ask questions.
And so everyone knows, I'm pretty sure that this is in dire need of proofreading. So feel free to be a grammar Nazi if you want. I really don't care. Yeah.
We're We're not in the Smithsonian. We're good. Okay. So, I mean, it's a pretty short article. So,
yeah, I don't feel the need to write it. I try to get it quick and to the point because I mean I don't think people really want to stare at their people already do stare at their phones.
yeah.
But I've also noticed too, like TikTok and and YouTube Shorts are a thing, and they're successful for a reason. So
Yeah, 100%. Society valuing the wrong things is why prepping is relevant. Yeah, Higgy, I think you're right, man. And that is like, what's crazy to me is that we have historical examples. This is why I do this whole thing. Like, we have historical examples of this stuff happening and leading. And when I say this stuff, I mean like in many different cases. There are many such cases. But when you're trying to prove something or show that something is likely or something is a problem, when you have examples from the past of this stuff happening and not working, then why are you doing it? Like, we know it doesn't work. We have evidence of it not working. And all the stuff we're doing today is just not working. Pretty much everything. I don't even have to go specific. So, grand plans of prepping, they are either oblivious to or refuse to accept some of the harsh realities of the world they think they are prepared to live in. And here you're talking about actual preppers.
oh yeah, this whole thing was fairly meant to. I don't want to say insult preppers, but I mean I've been in some sort of community of this since for like the last 9 years, and there's a lot of people have kind of convinced themselves that they're ahead of the curve and that they think they're more prepared than they actually are, essentially.
So what is the emphasis that you see in the prepping community, and why is it wrong?
Well, this actually leads kind of into my next article that I started working on.
Okay.
Something I've deemed the Chicken Little effect.
Okay, you want to expound?
If you know Chicken Little, the sky's falling. A lot of these preppers like to they jump on, especially in the content creation end of it. They jump on YouTube and they're like, we're running out of time. This is going to happen within the next couple of weeks. We're going to be dealing with these dire straits. And then the 2 weeks come by and nothing happens.
So they're on YouTube, right? But aren't
Yeah.
they like, you think that plays a part in it? Because there's an incentive to be as like, oh my God, the sky's falling as possible. That's how you
and then go to my website and buy your survival gear from my Amazon affiliate link.
Yeah. So how legit do you think those people are? Do you think it's all a grift, or do you think it's like 20% a grift? I'm sure it depends on the person, but like,
I think it's more because I've met a few of these people, especially in our region of the country. There's quite a few. I feel like it's more of the parent. I don't want to say like they're crazy, but I think it's more of the, they're deeply concerned and they're maybe a little bit overly paranoid.
okay.
I've met a couple of them, and there are 10% of them you can definitely tell when you meet them that they're maybe wound a little too tight, or that the elevator doesn't go completely to the top. Like, it gets up there, but it's not all the way up there.
Oh my God. Okay. Sweet.
But in terms of the
profiting, right? They're profiting from this.
Some are, some aren't. I mean, it's more of a. I've had people in my own group say this, that when they do interact, it seems more like they're there's a lot of self-congratulation and there's not a lot of criticism. Like they're like not like insulting criticism, but like constructive criticism. There's not even that. Like everyone's like, yeah, you're doing a great job. You're doing this. Everything's awesome. But there's no, but you could do this better. There's not a whole lot of that.
So you think they're not taking it seriously because they're not like really working to it? Like, are these guys rucking?
No, some of them are, yeah. Like some, yeah. There's a guy, the drop a name. He's actually a former New York City firefighter, and he actually was on Doomsday Preppers. A guy named, I forgot I'm not going to use his real name, even though I think he uses it, but a guy called Angry Prepper. I've actually met him a couple times. Like he knows shit, goes out and, he goes out, he rucks, he minimalist camps. He's actually been to Dave Canterbury's survival courses. I forgot the name of it, but I know Dave Canterbury should be enough of a name. Like he's actually invested money into bettering himself, and he's actually he's working to better other people.
So there are examples of people like taking it seriously, but do you think for other people, especially in these communities, that it is more of a social thing? Is that an element of this?
Oh, absolutely.
They just want somebody to hang out with that has similar beliefs?
I definitely feel like that's an element to it. There's definitely, there's a lot of, cross functionality. What's the word I'm thinking of? There's a lot of networking between them.
I mean, that has a pragmatic purpose as well, right? Like, is there an emphasis on like after the fall of how it's a community, a group, or is that not a part of it?
No, that's in the article before this one. I actually brought that up in terms of the survivalist end of the prepping community, is that they don't really look at an end game in terms of the survivalist aspect of it. Like they just, it's grab this, whatever you could fit in this bag and go in the woods. And I always bring up to them, okay, what about after that?
That's LARPing, dude. I mean, that's fully LARPing.
Yeah.
If you were really worried about, like, you would be really concerned with political theory and creating a structure that works in whatever thing it is. And that would be contextual as well, because it depends on what crisis you're seeing, what kind of response you have. Like, presumably, and this is later in your article, but like, there's going to be violence. That's what happens when societal breakdown happens, and then you're going to have a heavy hand that takes over.
Oh yeah, that's something that I brought up to some of the guys locally. Is that like this is something that a lot of them are afraid to cover because, again, I think a lot of it is that they also want to make this into a full-time YouTube gig, and you really can't talk about these type of things when you're trying to also make a living off of it. Also with that, with these conversations, a lot of people are like, they're also trying to they want to bring people into the idea of prepping and survival. And they feel like if they bring this up immediately, that it's just going to scare people off and they're not going to come back.
What's going to scare them off?
The violence factor.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, there's got to be some selection bias here as well, though, because you're talking about preppers who are also like content creators. So in that case, it's a very strong selection bias, because I'm sure that most preppers are not content creators. Just the ones that we see are.
Yes.
Yeah. There's probably some crazy dudes up a holler in West Virginia that are way more prepared than any of these freaking white collar dudes who have a bunker in their backyard.
Yeah, I've come across like the ones who are the most prepared are the ones who are the least vocal about it.
Of course, because that's part of it.
Yeah.
You don't want all these guys that are prepping when it actually comes. I mean, they've announced to the whole world where everything is and what resources they have and how defended they are. And shown that maybe they don't have a plan, or worse, what their plan is.
Yeah, that's always been. If you go on YouTube and you look up any sort of doomsday prepper clips, pretty much there's always at least one person in the comments section that says, "Well, thank you for telling me where all your shit is."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's. I mean, it's kind of obvious of a thing. All right. So from the chat, what do you suggest average people do to prepare? And I'm gonna quantify that just a little bit more. Like, what would be like the most basic thing you could do that's like, we'll say less than $200 and a weekend's time? What's the one thing you could do with less than $200 and a weekend to prepare for a collapse? Maybe the most likely, or just the most broad of a collapse.
Honestly, it's not very expensive, and that's pretty much what I do is food and water. Yeah, food and water storage. I mean, you go to the grocery store, a 20-pound bag of rice is still like $5-6. And currently in my closet, I think there's like 200 pounds of rice that I that I go to. Like I haven't bought rice in 3 years.
That's how the Japanese were island hopping without any things, man.
Yeah.
Those are true Japanese. Millet and rice.
Yeah. I think
Hardcore dudes.
I think a can of vegetables is like $1. So I mean, invest in some sort of way to store this stuff securely so it does last, and then you know buy a few cans of whatever people tend to buy things that they don't wouldn't eat. Like it's not hard. Like if you eat green beans, then buy green beans. If you don't eat radishes, then don't buy radishes. But people do that anyways. Buy whatever vegetables you do eat. Buy a can of each vegetable that you eat, and then buy a bag of rice. And store that over time. I think I have like 6 months of I have 6 months of vegetables in a storage area sitting in milk crates. You can buy milk crates, but I think you can also like just find them randomly.
Do you like? Sorry, go ahead.
No. That's pretty much it.
Do you with those vegetables? Do you then like actually eat those over time? Like, how does that work? And then replace them, or is this just those are only for that, and then you have to throw them out when they go bad?
No. People who are smart enough in this do like a rotating stock thing. They check the newer stuff to the rear, older stuff to the front, and if it's nearing its time, then hey, I don't have to go grocery shopping for a few weeks.
Okay, sweet. And then that also gives you like kind of a dry run of testing, like what the problems are and how you're going to eat with that supply of food. So that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing this before COVID hit, and when COVID did hit, I mean, the line to get into the grocery store was, 100 feet long. You pretty much had to wait for a comrade commissar to let you in. And then when you did get in, there wasn't really much to grab.
Yeah.
So, it was like, well, and then what you could grab was insanely expensive.
Yeah, people bought the cheap stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I should probably do this. I should probably have a bag of rice. I should probably have like a 40-pound bag of rice. That stuff's not expensive at all.
It actually, I sense a little bit of sarcasm in your voice, but it really isn't.
No,
I mean,
it
really
it's
is. Yeah.
not expensive. It's not. There was no sarcasm. No, it's super not expensive. Especially like, it depends on what rice you want. I would want that expensive basmati stuff. That's my favorite type of rice, but obviously we're going to go with something more nutritious and cheaper, like probably like a long grain brown. Is that what you go for, or what?
I go with like I think it's long grain white that I actually go for because that's usually what's in like the 20-pound bag.
Okay. Cool. I'm going to do this. I got to get a bag. All right. So the rise of warlords. Okay, what's your take on this rise of warlords? Just most people are going to be listening, not watching the video, so just
Yeah, that was actually my most self-censored part of this because I didn't want to go as grim as I would want to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to know what happens, just look at China prior to the 1950s. Like that's what happens.
I was going to say
warlords.
I was going to say, look at Africa for the last 50 years.
Yeah, seriously. Rwanda. I mean, not even, there's certain times where there was like an explicit genocide, but the common state of things for a long time was just absolute violence and terror, just not enough and in the way that would be considered genocide. But the violence was insane. As it is in many, it is in a lot of early less or more primitive political structure places, like anywhere with hunter gatherers has a pretty high violent death rate just because of the lack of political complexity and social stability. But at the same time, in Africa, a lot of these places were European colonies, and they already had a lot of them structures that were pretty violent, and then the structure of these colonies is imposed on them, which comes with its own violence. But then after that, it's stable after the violence has happened and it's calmed down. And then you remove that colonial structure, and then all you have is what came before, and there's a power struggle. It's kind of what happens. You can see this in like mafias, terrorists, like anywhere where there is some sort of organized crime that has control over a place, and then maybe a gang leader gets killed. There's always violence. It happens everywhere, and I don't know why people don't see the metaphors. Sorry, I talked too much.
No, but that was pretty much the point I was getting at with that section there, and I went less graphic than I wanted to, but I was just pretty much like, think of the most obscene, medieval, heinous acts of violence that you could think of, and it'll probably happen.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we don't have to go into it, but I mean, if you look, if you read the histories of anywhere, read the histories of the Plains Indians, of the Aztecs, of the early Gauls fighting Romans, of what the Celts did in the 17th century to shipwreck Spanish sailors. I mean, absolute brutality was the standard of humanity for the vast majority of our history, and it will be again without the social structure that we have. And that's not like I'm not one of these doomsday guys. I'm not saying that because I glorify it. I'm scared shitless of it, frankly. And the fact that it's a very real possibility, that I think people have a tendency to, when things are like that bad and that different from what they have, to downplay it, but it's very real. Um, so just checking with the chat real quick. Look at Mexico. Yeah, look at Mexico. There is stuff going on there. Also look at El Salvador. I mentioned that earlier. And hey, Craig, how you doing? Yep, it's Wednesday. We don't have as many people as we normally have because we're doing it on Wednesday instead of Thursday. But next week will be Thursday at 8 p.m. And I'm getting those episodes to you. Sorry, guys, I'm late again. I added more stuff in and everything. All right. What else do you have to say on that, if anything?
No, it's just because I'm just thinking dark now when it comes to like what can be possible with this. But I mentioned in there I didn't want to go as hard as I wanted to in the article, but I mean, here's a good analogy: is that we already have women on OnlyFans.
Oh God.
As in, the only thing that they're marketing is their body. What's going to happen when the internet stops? And again, it's the only thing that they have to market themselves. You're going to have the return. You know, I mentioned, I believe in this part that I mentioned that there's going to be a return to slavery.
Yeah.
Well, there's also going to be a return to that kind of slavery too.
So, and I have historical and contemporary examples for both of these because the so obviously we're talking about prostitution here, and this is not a good thing. You see in times of crisis, women are more likely to turn to prostitution, which is not a good thing. It's just not a good thing. You saw this in Germany after World War II. You saw it in all of the post-Soviet countries um, after the fall of the Soviet Union, and it's continued till today. I mean, it's like Czech and Hungarian porn is like a stereotype because of the post-Soviet countries, and you know this is a bad thing because these things are, you know, I have mixed thoughts about this. I was at Freedom Fest a few weeks ago, and I had a lot of long conversations with these women who are with an organization, and you know they were explaining to me how prostitution can be good and not bad for the woman, but it's hard for me to not think that it's inherently exploitative, and that's the situation that we're going to be in. And what was the other thing? Um, Slavery and sexual slavery. So yeah, slavery. I mean, look at Libya, dude. The United States destabilized Libya by getting rid of Gaddafi and other Western allies, the French. The French have done a lot of stuff in Africa for the last few decades. It's not just America that does this stuff. But in Libya, there are now open slave markets. And it's true that people generally go back to slavery in times of there being less social controls. So in Libya, it kind of had this imposed order on it, including impositions of Gaddafi trying to placate the West. So there was no slavery in Libya. And then you have the fall and everything is out of whack. I mean warlords came up, terrorists, warlords, whatever you want to call them. And now there was open slave markets, and it is a racial slavery. People don't like that. In America, most people think about the Atlantic slave trade to the United States. But in reality, the Atlantic slave trade was smaller and shorter than the Arab slave trade. This isn't excusing the Atlantic slave trade. It was very awful. And in particular, there were a few things about it that were really screwed up. Mostly that has to do with the connection with capitalism. I will probably be talking about that later, but there is something to be said about the connection with capitalism and it making slavery in like the chattel slavery kind of uniquely evil, but it's hard to compare slaveries. They're all bad. Reducing someone's it's bad. But what that's like 5% of the Atlantic slave trade, right? To the United States. Most of the slaves were in the Caribbean, which was way more deadly, way worse. If we're comparing slaveries, the West Indies was worse than the US. And then Brazil was a lot of them as well. That was 95% of it was places outside the US. And then you have the Arab slave trade, which went on for much longer. It was a lot of Africans and a lot of Europeans. It was more Africans than it was Europeans, but the amount of Europeans was more than the amount of black people in the or Africans in the Atlantic slave trade. So these things of scale. So the point is, in Libya, the slave trade is racially based chattel slavery because Libya is one of these North African countries that has an Arab whiter, like Gaddafi. You look at him, he's a white guy. Okay. He's a little bit olive. He looks Mediterranean. He's a white guy. All of the guys in the slave markets in Libya, they were black. And that's historically what it was. It was Middle Easterners, Muslims, mostly Arabs that were enslaving mostly black Africans, but also people in other parts of the world, and Europeans. More Africans than Europeans, but the amount of Europeans was millions, and it was more than the Atlantic slave trade. Um, yeah, I talked for a while, ranted, but if you don't like ranting, you wouldn't be listening to me. So we're here. All right. You got anything on that, Rex?
Um, no, that's pretty much it. It's just like, you know, the effects of conquest are gonna, like, we like to think of ourselves as more civilized people. You know, if you, I tend to make this reference when it comes to anything happening. We're gonna go back to Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
and what happens in Game of Thrones when cities get sacked? You know, people get slaughtered, women get, you know, the hard R word happens to them. That's kind of what I'm trying to. That's what I've been walking around for a bit now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You
of
know,
course.
um,
Yeah.
you know, burning, death, devastation. Like, people tend to, like, this is something that it really doesn't get talked about, and if it does, it's usually done in like a short 15-minute video where they kind of, you know, beat around the bush about it and don't really go into it as much as they probably should.
It's just I've brought up sexual assault, like I don't say that word. I think I have in a couple episodes, but like that's just it's a rough word to say. I'm talking a lot about symbols and words, and I mean the implication of what that is just, if you don't think that's a really really horrible bad thing, then I'm scared of you, because that's not human. It's a very very bad thing, and the fact that it happens more in these situations is something that should be, talked about. But it's taboo to talk about things like that, and for good reason, because like both of us right now, we don't want to talk about it because it's not fun to talk about. But it is something that should be addressed, so I'm glad we're addressing
Well,
it.
it's in terms of war crime trials, especially in Africa right now, it's being treated as a weapon of war.
I'm sorry, what?
It In terms of war crime trials, it's brought up because
What do you mean a weapon of war?
well, think about in Africa right now. It's a lot of ethnic conflict between tribes. Well, how do you defeat your opposing tribe?
Oh my
You
god.
breed them out.
Okay. Right. And this is something that I have seen in ancient sources, but um I didn't know I didn't know about modern. I'm just gonna make a note here. Cleveland, that's the word I use. By the way, guys, if you're listening to this live, which only a few people are because we're on the wrong day, Cleveland, if you didn't know, is the word I use to find it in the thing. But Cleveland, I'm gonna mark this part of the thing with a literal trigger warning, um, for sexual assault. Okay, let's move on from that. But yeah, that's a thing. That's a thing, and in not just women,
No,
and yeah, not just women. By the way, it's it's not funny. So what else do you have to say on the prepping stuff?
Well, I see we're on the "you will probably die" section
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
article
Unless you
here.
have anything to say about this.
No, I kind of I got through my bit.
Yeah. Okay, so let's wrap up
Um,
this topic and then we can talk about a couple other things and then
yeah.
call it.
Well, this, if I remember correctly, because I haven't looked at the article in a while, this was more about like how the small things that we take for granted today are going to kill you, and that's something that I really don't see a lot of the prepping community as a whole go over is just how simple you could die. Like a lot of people have, they have field med kits, and a lot of the pre-made med kits are always meant to treat combat injuries.
Mm.
And there I've had many talks on water purification, and that is something that does get brought up in terms of purifying water. But I have always wanted to go into the historical context of this in terms of the Hundred Years' War.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
let's do that.
and I just think of Edward the Black Prince and Henry V. They are the only two good British royal commanders that existed in this time period,
Okay.
and neither of them died in combat.
What, a boar hunt related injury?
No, they both died of dysentery.
Oh my god. That's awful. That's awful.
No,
Why is that though? Why'd they get dysentery? Did they have like unsanitary camp conditions or something?
well, it's unsanitary camp conditions is drinking unsanitary water. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
But do we
something
know
that
specifically for them?
I don't think so. At least I don't know. But as far as I know, they both died of dysentery. And I
I mean that's
mean,
like 14th century. That's before the modern era.
yeah.
They had that.
But to think that this, let's go more recent. Gettysburg. General Lee was absent for most of the combat because he had dysentery.
I mean the Civil War itself, both the Union and the Confederacy had more casualties from disease than they did from combat.
Yeah, I mean, to go to George Washington, Valley Forge, I believe it was either Valley Forge or it was the winter before that. He had to put down mutinies because guys were dying of smallpox.
Yeah, right. I was just reading about that or listening to that somewhere. So, okay, so let's bring this back into prepping. So with these things, is there anything that like is like we have I have med kits in my house. I have more than most people probably have. I have tourniquets as well. But I have like regular med kit, I have gauze, I have different creams. I have a pretty big med kit. But those med kits are made for like modern society. So is there anything that isn't in a normal household medical kit that you would need after the collapse that you can regularly get now? You know what I'm saying?
There's a lot of medicinal things that you can start growing. There's a lot of medicinal plants, and
Yeah.
people tend to look away from this stuff.
Have you listened to my
Um,
episode on medicine, by the way?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to.
That's all right. That's all right. That's
Um,
included in number one. But I get into this. I get into the medical properties of plants and the tradition behind them and everything.
yeah, and one thing that you can stock up on that people tend to, I've heard crazy things of like treating wounds with like black pepper.
Huh.
I'm not entirely
Any reason
sure.
for that?
I don't remember. I just remember someone bringing it up, and I'm looking at him like he had stuff growing out of his forehead.
Yeah.
Um, but it's something. If it's legit, it's worth looking into. I mean, this one's kind of a goofy one too, but stockpiling sugar. That was a Napoleonic War treatment.
Huh. Sugar. Sugar was expensive back then too, wasn't it? Jeez.
Yeah, well, sugar is $5 a pound now.
Yeah. Right. Okay, I can afford that.
Or no, wait, no, 5 pounds for like $3. It's
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
thought it
cheap.
was
It's cheap.
even $5 a pound would be cheap. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, it's more of they take modern medicine, they take modern amenities for granted.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. But
Um,
sometimes you just don't know which ones are going to be the ones, you know?
yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I really got to pee, so I'm going to be right back because that's distracted me and I can't. So I'll be right back. You say whatever you want. Just don't get me banned on YouTube for the next, 2 minutes.
Okay, first time I've hosted anything in a while. Yeah, if you guys have not heard of me before, go ahead and maybe check out the Substack or subscribe to it. I'm always up for constructive criticism, so if you want to leave comments, go ahead and do that too. Um, yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now. I'm just going to be quiet until he gets back.
Okay. Did you say anything, or did you just say?
I just said a little bit. I just kind of pushed. I just self plugs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, this reminds me again. I think it's available on YouTube. History Channel, back before they got all like aliens and everything. They did a special on the country. It was like the scenario was the country collapsed because of like a super flu outbreak, and it actually took it fairly seriously.
I feel like I vaguely remember that, but it's probably just something that someone.
Yeah, like I just remember like they stayed in their to go through it all. They stayed in their home for like a couple weeks, and then roving bandits were breaking in the homes. Well, first they threw a bunch of stuff in the front yard to make it look like the house has already been ransacked.
Okay.
Then they realized that they had to leave, and they tried leaving with a vehicle, but all the roads were blocked up.
Yeah.
Which is always theory. I'm not, every movie and every post-apocalyptic show does that, where like all the roads are just filled with cars. I'm not like, I feel like that's just done because, well, cities are always jammed with traffic.
Cities, but highways is weird unless there's something specific that happened on the highway.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is though that like while that probably won't be everywhere, I think that almost like there's going to be some places that are just completely blocked because of some event. And
I feel like that's going to be Long Island.
Oh,
like the LIE. I know.
If you live on Long Island and there's a zombie outbreak, you get on a boat and you go to Fisher's Island or Block Island or one of the places over there. Not Plum Island, because there's a government research center there, but
not Rikers Island.
No, Rikers Island. Yeah. Yeah. If you're in San Francisco, don't go to Alcatraz. Go somewhere else. There's bad juju over there. What other societal collapse movies are there?
Because I know a lot of people enjoy there are a lot of people are on like a Cormac McCarthy kick right now, so I'll just go ahead and say The Road.
The Road? What is that? I haven't seen
Viggo Mortensen and a little kid. I don't remember the entire premise of it, but it's like a very, very dark take on it. Like
I like cartoons. I don't watch that shit.
Like pretty much everyone they come across is a cannibal.
Oh, dude, that just reminded me of the Book of Eli. That creepy scene, dude. You remember that one?
Oh yeah, you have disco playing, and then you see because they kind of tease it on what the cannibalistic characteristics, and like she's giving him tea and she got the shakes. That was freaking what was his name? The Harry Potter guy. Dumbledore. That was Dumbledore.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, you can't tell because he doesn't have the beard, but that was Dumbledore. That's
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. cannibals, dude. There's this thing with unless did you have something on that? Sorry.
Oh no, I just wanted to get back to the point of the art where we're back
Oh
with
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
article.
yeah. I'm sorry. I thought we
With
were
this
on the
show.
article.
Well, yeah. Well, they get trapped and then they find themselves in like a. That was something I don't think I mentioned in the article and I forgot about it. But you're going to have a lot of like fire and brimstone religion make a return too.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this thing. This is like in times of crisis, people look to the past. Is what they do. So like you have these things in your society that are in the past that you can look to and that you can use for inspiration. And like that's already relevant right now. Already people are looking to the classics. They're looking to these other traditions. I know I am. I'm looking at Proto-Indo-European stuff, Anglo culture stuff, old, because our culture is rooted in Anglo culture, which is rooted in Indo-European culture. I mean, there's a few more steps before that, before you get there. I skipped a few, but there's lessons in our history that can be used to create something new in the face of new problems. And I think one of the best examples of this is the Magi restoration, or not the Magi restoration, but like all the modernizing with like samurai culture that Japan did. And it's an extreme example because Japanese people are an extreme people, but that's something that's built into their culture. They're extreme, and I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, it just yeah, like I was making this joke to myself a couple of days ago. I'm like, I think the Westboro Baptist Church was like 10 years early to the party because if they became a thing now, I feel like they would have a lot bigger following than they kind of faded out, and and now you see a lot of I'm starting to see it more with like the evangelicals. They're going like far, far, far right now.
Well, I mean that's kind of the situation we're in, though, and I'm not excusing people going far right. I'm not a far right person.
No, my concern is that you have like these like tent revivalist guys, and it's gotten to the extreme now where it's like if you have any opinion that is left now, that you're not just wrong, but this one guy, I forgot his name. But I think Vice and Showtime CNN, everyone have done like little bits on him. He's like, if you don't agree with what I say, you don't agree with what the Bible says, you are a crack smoking child molester.
Dude, what a
like every Democrat is a crack smoking child molester, and it's a lot of it has to do with the whole QAnon thing too.
Yeah, but even something like QAnon's actually a good example because like. The reason QAnon got popular is number one, the news is lying to you all the time. 2008 happened. That was a big part of QAnon. I guarantee it. Because a lot of these people were Obama supporters in the past. Okay. These aren't like traditional Georgia racists and like a drawl who were like living on plantations. These are normal Americans. But the QAnon thing, man, like, okay, so there's people who come out and they're like, oh, there's a whole deep state cabal and they're all pedophiles. And then Jeffrey Epstein happens. You can't blame people for thinking this when they find out as adults that, oh my God, everybody has lied to us. The news has lied to us all the time. They get all this information at the same time. And then Jeffrey Epstein gets caught. Like, they're right. Like QAnon, I know there's crazy stuff in QAnon, but look at like the basic parts of QAnon. Don't look at the craziest elements of it. The basic parts of QAnon is that there is a deep state run by pedophiles, and that's kind of objectively true. Yeah, I don't want to get killed though, so I should probably talk about that less. But that's a thing. Everyone knows it's a thing.
Yeah, it's just, and just to get with the modern thing, like that's why you have that pushback on that movie Sound of Freedom.
Right.
Like that's a very polarizing movie. Like I personally don't want to watch it because I've heard enough things about how actual lunatic Jim Caviezel is. And the guy he's based on in the movie, I've heard some really shifty things about Operation Underground Railroad, about how they're not actually as authentic as they claim.
I can't speak on that at all because I don't know. But
no, and unfortunately, the only sources on this stuff are like the left. So they're already trying to be against it no matter what goes on, and they're in this weird it's in this weird rock and hard place kind of position.
It's so weird to me because like I don't know why it was politicized in this way. Like I didn't I'm not gonna watch a movie like that because I like to watch happy movies. You know, I watch cartoon movies. I like them. You guys know that if you're a listener. Um, but it's a movie about a true story about catching child sex
Uh,
traffickers, and it's clearly a problem in our society. So it's really weird to me that people are like, oh, this is a right wing thing. It's like it shouldn't be.
well, the true story part of that's a kind of a loose term, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it
At least
also
in terms of what at least in terms of what I've heard, it's
it's a
more
Hollywood movie.
inspired. Yeah, it's more inspired than it is based. Apparently, there's a difference.
Is there ever a based on that's like really based on? That's a
Eh,
rhetorical question.
yeah, but I'd say the history buffs YouTube channel can actually determine that one for you.
Okay. All right. Well, I you want to send me that? I might be interested in it.
Yeah.
We've got a question in the chat. I'm sorry, unless you had something else.
No, no, no.
Yeah. So this is back to what we were talking about before, but oh, it's not a question. But History Channel also had a special called "Slaves of the Sahara." I think it was a true story of Christian sailors shipwrecked and were taken into the Arab slave trade. Worth watching. Yeah. So like, I think that a lot of people view especially liberals view white people bringing up the Arab slave trade and Christian slaves as like a fake thing. But it wasn't a small thing. It was a really common problem. And I think part of that comes from like, it comes from people today. It almost comes from white supremacy, to be honest, because people today, even if they're attacking the idea of white supremacy, their worldview is based on the idea that Europeans are superior to other people because it's based on the idea that like Europe was always better. But when the Arab slave trade was happening, I mean, the Ottoman Empire was better than Europe, like they were stronger than Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years, really up until the 19th century. So even in the 1700s and into the 1800s, this is a really common thing. And it's really the Ottoman Empire that's the real power. It's the Muslims that have the real power. And that only really shifts in the 19th century, maybe the 18th, you could argue. Um, and the Arab slave trade was like a real problem. And for me, excuse me, for me personally, I'm essentially 3/4 Irish and a quarter Hungarian, and both the Irish and the Hungarians were victims of a lot of the Arab slave trade. And other people in the Balkans, Hungary is sometimes considered the Balkans. Other people in the Balkans, were living under the Ottoman yoke, and part of like the fact that I don't get to have a historical grievance, like I'm not like by the culture allowed to have a historical grievance against the Arab slave trade, is part of why I think so much of this shit is bullshit. Because like nobody gives a shit. I'm just a white guy, and then I get lumped in with the white people who oppressed like my grandfather and everyone else for 700 years before that, and I'm just supposed to be thrown in with them. And if I complain about that, then it's white fragility or whatever, and that's why I don't care about any of this shit. But I got way off topic. Sorry, Rex. What do you have to say?
No, just I was waiting for you to bring up the whole thing with the Irish too.
Yeah.
I mean, let's put it this way: there's a reason that they say when the Queen died.
Lizzie's in a box. In a box. So it's funny you bring that up because are we good with the article, by the way? Did we go through everything we wanted to?
I was about to ask you that too. Are you good with? I think we might have skipped a couple of things, but
Unless you wanted to bring them back up, I'm good. Yeah, I just
no,
want to have a
yeah,
general conversation about prepping.
no, we're good.
Okay, so let's just talk about a few more things. And that Lizzie's in a box thing. I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but my family my family's very Irish, like very, very Irish. A lot of times Irish Americans are like, oh, my great grandfather was Irish, but like, Knights of Columbus, Order of the Hibernians, Irish Fest in Kansas City every year. My family's very Irish. Very Irish American, I should say. And I was coming back. I was driving back from the Kansas City Irish Festival last year when the Queen died. And the first thing I thought of was, damn, I wish we were still at the Kansas City Irish Fest when they announced this. Because people would have lost their minds if the Queen had died. Irish Americans, who are American, by the way. Like, we're American. Irish is the quantifier. That's the type of American we are. We're still Americans. But everybody would have still just been like ecstatic. People would have been losing their minds at this situation that the Queen died at the Irish Fest. It would have been incredible. Instead, I went to an Irish restaurant in a strip mall and nobody gave a shit. And I was wearing a Celtics jersey that nobody mentioned. Not Boston Celtics. Sorry, Celtic FC. Liz is in a box.
Yeah, it's funny with me because my dad, his father and grandfather were like 100% Irish. Like I'm not sure if my great grandfather was off the boat Irish or if it was his father, but they was pretty much all Irish. My grandfather, being the cheeky fellow that he was, apparently, when he was in the Air Force, married an English woman, like from England. He was stationed there and he married a local. So, like. No, it's kind of interesting though, because on 4th of July, my dad raises the American flag and underneath it is the Union Jack. Just kind of like the whole like that side of, I guess there's like a side of conquest there.
Yeah. I mean, the better thing would be to just not raise it at all.
I know. But and I go to my grandma and I'm like, Happy Treason Day on 4th of July. But no, he sent me a text being like, the Queen is dead. God Save the King, and I just sent them back 2 memes. One was Sandor Clegane, and the other one was George Washington, both saying "fuck the king."
Yes. What I was saying for a while, and I'm still saying, is the Queen is dead. Fuck the king.
Yeah. Well, and then I remember because I was in Afghanistan when when Prince William got married, and I was like, someone's like, you watching the wedding? And I'm like, well, I'm stationed next to a couple of Brits. I really don't have an option in that, but I do make sure to tell them "fuck the king" when I get the chance.
Yeah, I wouldn't tolerate that. I would not shut up that entire time.
No, the longest conversation I had was with a British major, where I'm asking him, "Could you explain the game of cricket to me?" And he spent half an hour explaining cricket. I'm like, yeah, I still don't get it.
No, I don't get it because it's dumb. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get the chance. My dad's like, or was it? I remember, like, did you watch the funeral? I'm like, why the fuck am I going to watch I thought, no, I'm like, I said to my dad, I'm like, I thought we fought a revolution so that we didn't have to give a fuck about this anymore. And I do believe that your Irish grandfather right now would probably be singing that song like the rest of them.
Dude, that's the thing. Okay, so my mother has, like, I'm not going to say my mother's name, but my mother has a super Irish name. And the story that I had always heard, like, is that, on my mother's side, my grandma is English, but my grandfather was Irish. But, like, DNA test, we find out my grandma, who was like I live in Connecticut, so it's all like this old money shit that my grandma wasn't a part of, but she wanted to be, because that's like the generation she was from, is like that's what was promoted. And we find out that my grandma was a quarter English. She was 3/4 Irish and a quarter English. So she like thought she was English. She talked about all this English stuff all the time. But in reality, only one of her grandparents was English. And then my mom is 7/8 Irish, and then my dad is half Irish. But yeah, I didn't know that until then, and then we learned that. So before we leave, anybody got any questions in the chat? And then we're gonna hop off here. It's been an hour, but this was good. I had something else to say. Shit. What were we talking about before?
Prepping in society.
Yeah, no, like right before this.
I don't know. We were talking about the Irish and the slavery. Well, we're talking about the slave trade and how, white people, God forbid, white people bring up the fact that they were slaves. I mean, I do believe that right after the revolution, the first war we fought was over Barbary slave trade. Mm-hmm. So I'm like,
yeah. Here, I got the book right here. Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. It's somewhere here.
And I mean, to get our veteran jollies up, we were both Marines. The Marine officer saber came from that battle, from that war.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it did, and that's because the Marines just landed there. And they had a few dozen guys, and they just like brought the empire to their knees. I never really understood that. I don't know how they really got that done.
I don't know. If you ever look at like historical Marine Corps stuff, it's always like a small band of Marines took on thousands of the Horde. I mean, but then again, that could just be Marine Corps propaganda, because if you actually look into the history, of the NCO blood stripe, the Marine Corps gives one version of the story, and the real version is actually something completely different.
It's completely made up. The death rate was like exaggerated by like 5 times.
Well, no, the blood stripe had nothing to do with the Battle of Chapultepec.
Really?
The blood stripe was about NCOs not getting paid.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was like a pay dispute.
That's a dumb reason.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Earned that shit. I got my legs beaten the crap out of. I got blood striped for that shit. Are you serious?
Yeah, it was like
blood striped me for a thing that was a protest on pay.
Yeah, it wasn't. It had nothing to do with the Battle of Chapultepec. I believe the reality of it was that NCOs were complaining about getting paid the same amount as lower enlisted, and they wanted like a similar rate to the officers. The officers already had the blood stripe, so they're like, you know what? To keep you happy, we'll let you wear the blood stripe too. And they were like, fine.
7 years ago, I was taken into an office by 4 NCOs, and I was beaten in my legs in an homage to the NCOs at the Battle of Chapultepec in the Mexican-American War, who got decimated, more than decimated, because decimated is only 10%. They got like 80% casualties, and I come to find out that it was about some fucking bullshit pay dispute.
Pretty much. I mean, I believe there's a little bit more. There's more going on there, but I believe that was the point to it. Okay. You gotta remember, man. You gotta think about this, man. This is part of why I got out, because the Marine Corps is so hopped up on like.
How many years did you do, by the way?
I just did 4, and I said, "Fuck you, I'm out." I got corporal 6 months before I got out, and I'm like, "Yep, okay, I'm done."
Dude, me too. I was a lance corporal for 30 months. 30 months I was. Yeah, I was the seniorest of the senior. Ugh. But sorry.
No, that's pretty much it. You got to think about like why do like if the Marine Corps will give its. I always said there's different. Here are the real Marine Corps. There's 4 different Marine Corps, or maybe 5. What the Marine Corps thinks it is, what the Marine Corps shows itself to be, what the Marine Corps is supposed to be, and what the Marine Corps actually is. And yeah. the act, what it thinks it is like this pompous ceremony, based in tradition fighting force. It's meant to be this like amphibious, in reality it should be like this, semi-amphibious military force. Mm-hmm. But in reality, it's just a bunch of drunken assholes fucking each other over first chance they get.
And that is where we're going to end it. And that connects into mythical stories and how they're used to promote certain beliefs and values. And that's what we're going to be talking about when we continue with the anthropology of religion on the standard Illegitimate Scholar episodes. I'm going to have that episode out in a couple days, and then the next one after that. And thanks. Before we go, Rex, you got anything you want to promote?
Just, check out the Substack. The link is on my Instagram page, which is now, I believe, Rex_Shenanigans. Or just type that in your search bar and it should be there.
I'll link to your Substack down
below. Yeah. And that's about it.
All right. Well, let's end this here. All right. Later, guys.